today's episode of the Couch GMs podcast. It is Thursday, September 9th, which means one thing, and that is NFL regular season is finally here, and we are going to be here reviewing the top stories of the week and a week one preview. The whole gang is here. We got the three best friends that anyone could ask for. It's Cody Roadcap and Tyler Snyder with us. How you doing today, guys?
Doing good. Excited for the game. Wish it wasn't Tom Brady. Even though I kind of like him now after all this offseason of him like growing up on Twitter. Slowly becoming a Tom Brady fan. Tom Brady the person, not the player.
Nope. Can't say the same thing
here. Disappointment in Tyler's face. I was going to say the disappointment in your face.
Zero bit of me as a Tom Brady fan. But this is my favorite holiday. NFL kickoff is better than Christmas. It's better than Thanksgiving. If you disagree, that's fine. You're welcome to have wrong opinions. But this is my favorite holiday, and I am excited for kickoff, even if it is two teams I don't like.
I'm glad you picked holidays that also have football on them. So great
Ain't
point
that
there
the
by
truth? The only thing that really knocks down the 4th of July and other holidays like that is there's no football. You're right. But why don't we talk some football and we jump into some NFL news for the week. And I guess we should lead off NFL news with could have happened almost 2 weeks ago, but we missed this all last week thanks to some complications due to the hurricane. Again, we send out our wishes to everybody down in New Orleans that was affected by the hurricane. But in the meantime, the Ravens lost their starting running back, J.K. Dobbins, to the season for a knee injury. And they also lost Justice Hill, who's going to be their number 2 after all the injury scenarios happening here. We got Gus Edwards now as the lead back in Baltimore. And anyone that took him as a late round flyer or whatever it might be is now getting, I think, a 3rd round talent running back. What are your guys' thoughts on Gus Edwards now for the season?
I mean, 3rd round talent is a little bit of a stretch to me because I don't think that the Ravens are just going to say the job is all Gus Edwards, run with it. They do have the rookie in there that has shown flashes, but also you got to remember they did just sign Le'Veon Bell to the practice squad. Yes, it is just the practice squad, but that means he can be called up at any time and jump right into that role. And though he is getting up there in age, he's really only actually 26. And a 26-year-old Le'Veon Bell is still better than most of the people on free agency and everything right now. So I think he could really slot in there, provide some talent right away. So Gus Edwards, I think, is going to be good for the first few weeks, but I think eventually he's going to be splitting some carries with some other people there.
Interesting. Quick correction. Le'Veon Bell is 29. He wears 26, but still under the age of 30 for running his running back. It's all good. It's been a while since he's played, but I'm interested to see him play against Pittsburgh, at least that week. I think should be a fun game for sure. But I do like Gus Edwards. 3rd round is probably the earliest I would have taken him. And maybe you're still drafting this afternoon before games are happening, and I would take him there. But he's like right above that running back dead zone we saw in rounds 4 and 5 for me. I think he could have some value all season long, and jealous of everyone that drafted early and got him in rounds 12 and 14. What a steal.
I think I just have the faith in Gus Edwards because I know we've seen him play before. A lot of times when you have a guy step in for an injury, even a Darrell Henderson. Like Darrell Henderson hasn't played all that much. He hasn't really been an exclusive starter, but you got to have faith in him because he's going to get carries. Gus Edwards was actually a starter for Baltimore for a year, so he has a little bit of a proven track record. I think that's why I have a little bit of faith that he's going to at least hold some carries throughout the season. But other injury news to talk about here, the Saints kept wide receiver Michael Thomas on the PUP list, which means he will be out at least 5 weeks. We knew the timeline was anywhere from like 3 weeks in the season to 8. So that's just looking more like that's going to be the longer end of the injury spectrum. Anyone that took him in round 8, you just better hope you can stash him on a reserve spot. And what are you thinking about that Saints wide receiver core after the preseason now?
Well, it used to be that you would try to find those guys in the Saints depth chart that might be sneaky good plays for a week there. It was like Traquan Smith for a while there. You're like, hey, Traquan Smith, he might be the guy. He might be able to play him a week here or a week there, and he'll be the guy. He's the guy now. Michael Thomas isn't there. So Traquan Smith is going to have to step into a bigger role if he's healthy. There's also a few other people there that are worth looking at. Cody, you want to go over some of them?
For sure. The guy I was actually going to mention was Marquez Callaway. He was the preseason star, deep threat. He's been around the league for a few years. Seems to finally have latched on with the New Orleans Saints, and be able to provide some value, especially with Michael Thomas out. And the other guy, I've talked about him all offseason. I know he's dealing with a little bit of injury. He might not even play week 1. But that's tight end Adam Troutman. Jared Cook is gone. They picked the gunslinger and Jameis Winston. So definitely a guy to watch out for. But do remember, these wide receivers are new, and they are playing the Packers week 1. And even though the guys hate when I talk about the Packers, they can all admit that Jair Alexander is a top 3 corner in the league. So whoever is the true number 1 will see a lot of Jair and might be off to a slow start, whether that's Tre'Quan Smith or whether it's Marquez Callaway. Don't be afraid to still look at them in the waivers the following week, or if somebody picked them up this week, drops them next week, don't be afraid to add them back. They could be definitely good for the first half of the season.
And I know you mentioned tight ends there, so I think it's good to jump to some other tight end news where the Vikings found out that their tight end, Irv Smith, is going to be out for the season with an injury. We all had a little bit of faith that he was going to finally have his breakout season. But another guy who's always been on the tight end radar, we think he's going to break out, then he doesn't. And again, Chris Herndon, formerly of the Jets, was traded to the Vikings and gets yet another shot to be the guy who's going to break out for tight ends in fantasy. Do you have any faith in Chris Herndon? Would you add him as a speculative ad, or did you just wait and see?
In my opinion, absolutely I'd add him as a speculative ad, because if we're talking about outside the top, let's say 5 tight ends, because you have your big 3, obviously, but then you can link like a Mark Andrews in there. After you get out of those top tight ends, all of them are speculative ads. Honestly, every tight end in the lower half of the board is just speculation. You don't know who's going to be good. You could add an Evan Engram, but he might only be good 3 or 4 weeks out of the season. You could add a Kyle Rudolph when hope that he's actually the guy for the Giants, but that's not going to work. Or you could add Anthony Ferkser because he's the number 1 for the Titans, but they're saying that his blocking's not very good, so he might not be on the field too much. You don't know with these tight ends. All of them are speculation. So honestly, you have a guy who's talented and should slot in as the number 1 tight end for a team that does like to throw the ball. So why not? Why not give him a shot as your backup?
Yeah, I'm with you. I tend to only carry 1 tight end on my roster, and I'm a big guy in streaming tight ends. So he's a guy I would take a look at if the matchup is a good one, and they have a decent matchup this week. So maybe I would consider playing him. Week 1 might be a little early, trying to get him to see how he'll be acclimated. But guys, he's another guy that will see the Adam Gase effect come off. He's no longer with Adam Gase. He looked most promising the year before Adam Gase got there. Chris Herndon could be a late round guy or a guy, because we were expecting big things out of Irv Smith. He was the 8th round wonder tight end that everyone thought could leap into that top 5 after the big 3. Maybe that's Chris Herndon this year, because we know they have the wide receivers that are going to see a lot of coverage, and Kirk Cousins loves the tight end. So Chris Herndon, definitely a name to keep an eye on.
Definitely agree with that. I mean, I would add him as a speculative ad there as well, or maybe take him as a late round flyer if you have not drafted yet. And we'll keep an eye out if he's on the waiver wire. Maybe he'll be on our waiver wire segments in the next few weeks, but we'll keep you updated. A couple quick hit news segments on some quarterbacks. The Texans named Tyrod Taylor their starting quarterback. This likely means Deshaun Watson will not play this season. He's just going to be a healthy scratch every week. So if you added him late in your drafts, feel free to drop him. He's not going to do anything for you. The Patriots check down Cam Newton. That means that Mac Jones will be the starter up in New England, and Cam Newton is still a free agent. We'll see if he ends up landing somewhere after a quarterback injury or something later in the season. And then in defense news, Malcolm Butler, former cornerback of the Titans. I believe he was with the Cardinals now in this preseason.
Yeah, he was with the Cardinals this preseason. He was signed to actually be one of their starting guys, and he was fully slotted, ready to play this year. He's got a passion for football, but then it came out that he had some personal issues he was dealing with at home that caused him to miss a week or 2 of training camp. And then afterwards, he came back to the team and said, guys, the personal issues are big enough. I might have to either take a year off or just retire from football as a whole. So we don't know what's going on. We don't know what it is that caused him to step away from the game, the personal issues, but whatever it is, we wish him the absolute best. He's a great guy, does a lot for the community, so I hope nothing but the best for the Butler family. Hopefully it's nothing too serious.
Agreed there. Our wishes out to you, Malcolm Butler. And then finally, we got the Saints cut backup running back Latavius Murray. So if you were somebody who handcuffed Alvin Kamara with Latavius Murray, you can now let him go. We'll let you know if he lands anywhere in the next week or two, but it's Tony Jones, I believe is the name, is now the wonder backup for Alvin Kamara. He'd be the handcuff if you're looking for somebody there or somebody who could grab a few carries a game. We'll see how that goes in week 1 there as well.
We all know running back 2 is Taysom Hill, so you don't need Tony Jones Jr. on your roster. If Kamara gets hurt, spend all your fab to get him then. But at this time, leave Tony Jones sitting definitely in the waiver wires. But that hits up news, so time for George's favorite segment, Quotes of the Week.
Quotes of the week. I'm going to keep it a little bit short this week because we want to get to some week 1 previews, obviously. But I got 2 of them for us this week. First, quarterback Jared Goff on the Detroit Lions contending this year. Externally, I couldn't care less what they think. Obviously, hopefully there's a chance that we could, hopefully if there's something to surprise us, we will do that. But, every day is a new day and we're just trying to win. Considering how the Lions just signed up this head coach that's been all hype and screaming at press conferences and seems like he's really getting the team on board. I mean, there's some positivity there, but I feel like it wasn't as much fire as I expected out of Jared Goff, honestly.
It's Jared Goff.
Nothing special about Jared Goff.
I have nothing else to add.
Okay.
No offense, Jared
And then
Goff.
we got Cardinals coach Cliff Kingsbury, who is a former NFL player, if you guys out there do not know, talking about cut days at the end of the preseason. He said he himself was cut 7 or 8 times, and you remember that. The things he appreciated the most were just a kind word and, stating that they appreciated the work he put in the preseason, and that doesn't take a lot of time. He did that for all of his players, and on his cut days, he said he hopes that he has a good relationship with those guys for the future. I imagine that's one of the toughest things to do as a coach, is to tell somebody they've been cut on cut day, especially when you have to do it again and again for, say, 20 guys near the end of the preseason.
Yeah, it's always, I know why they do it, but it's always blown my mind that they go from 90 to 53. So, they have to cut 37 players to get down to.
Well, this year they went to 85. And then
they went to 85 to 80 and then to 53. So you're right. This year there was a little bit of a progression, but still, you still have to cut 37 players and you're bringing in new guys. So you're probably cutting around 40 to 45 each offseason because you're bringing in new ones after players are cut. Definitely the toughest job about being a coach, but that's what them being there. If they put in the effort, they might latch onto the practice squad. Someone gets hurt, someone from the practice squad gets called up. Now they're on the practice squad. So I don't know why I'm preaching to NFL players. I'm just a dude with a podcast. But honestly, putting all your work in training camp can go a long way because oftentimes if at the end of the season, the roster has gone through 80 to 90 guys. So definitely a hard part about being coaching, but hopefully that kind word goes a long way and they're back on that team or another team soon.
Yeah, and like you said, Cody, I mean, just because you get cut from your team doesn't mean you're not going to play in the NFL this season. And I think there's a lot of guys that get signed by teams for preseason knowing that they won't make the team. I mean, if you go into a team that has 4 good running backs already and you're the 5th or 6th running back, you're not going to make that team. But you give it your all and perform, you have a chance to make the practice squad. You have a chance to make another squad. You have a chance that mid-season there's an injury and maybe somebody looks at you because of your great training camp. So, yeah, it's just goodbye for now. It's not goodbye forever. I think a lot of these guys are going to end up on rosters by the end of the season.
And that was nice and lighthearted from all of us here to go back into what is going to be the most important segment for us here coming up in the regular season. Why don't we look at some week 1 previews? And why don't we kick off our week 1 preview with, obviously, Thursday night football. We got Cowboys at Buccaneers. I think my question about this one in the big game would be, what are you doing with Buccaneers running backs? Are you starting Ronald Jones? Are you starting Leonard Fournette? Both, neither. Cody, why don't you start us off with that one? What are you thinking about the Buccaneers backfield?
Well, I'm doing everything I can to not start either of them. Hopefully it's week 1 and you have running backs drafted higher than both of them went that you can start. Hopefully you drafted your flex before they can start. But maybe you're out there and you had J.K. Dobbins, you have Darrell Henderson. Dobbins is out for the year. Henderson, we're still not 100% sure if he'll play week 1. It's trending that way, but it could be he plays on Sunday night, so you have to make your decision early on Thursday. Can you afford to wait? If that's the case, I'm leaning Leonard Fournette. What he did in the playoff run, I know they still love Ronald Jones. I know that Gio Bernard is still going to get carries. It's going to be a mess. But I think if any of them is going to score a rushing touchdown, it's going to be Leonard Fournette. So that's what I'm going to chase.
Yeah, I agree with that, Cody. I mean, as a guy who owns Ronald Jones and Leonard Fournette in different leagues, you just got to kind of leave them on the bench and wait it out. Ronald Jones was the guy all year last year during the regular season, but Leonard Fournette was the guy in the playoffs. So which one's really going to be it? Hopefully it's one of them and not both of them, because, Georgia's favorite thing in the world is that running back by committee.
I think it's all of our favorite thing in the world, honestly.
But, speaking of running backs, how about, I know Zeke, he fell in a lot of drafts. At the beginning of the offseason, he was, pick 5. And then by the time we were drafting and stuff, he barely went in the first round. Most of the times, was going in the second round. A crazy fall for Ezekiel Elliott, but they did just lose Zach Martin, one of the top right guards in all of football, to the COVID list. He won't play. We know how good the Buccaneers defense is. Are you guys just still rolling with Zeke because of his draft capital? Or is there any fading for a guy like Gus Edwards? If you would have picked up Gus Edwards or James Robinson even before the Travis Etienne news, would you bench Zeke? I know as crazy that sound was to play one of those guys, or you got to roll with your studs?
Well, I mean, I'm the advocate of roll with your studs. So I definitely think you have to start Zeke until there's a reason for you to not start Zeke. But even more, if you want a reason to start Zeke, he was struggling last year without Dak. Dak is back. He appears to be 100% healthy. He says that he can do what he did last year plus more. Zeke is better with Dak. And I don't care how good the Buccaneers defense is. I have no doubts that the Cowboys are going to put up a ton of points this season. The only reason they might not win games is because their defense is going to struggle again. I have no problem starting Zeke. I do like the two guys you mentioned. We can talk about them later in their games. I might start them over some other backs, but anyone you took in the first round or even early second round, you took them there for a reason. Why would you bench them week 1 right away? That doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, as a guy who went bold in his draft and took Zeke and Barkley at 10 and 11, I'm starting both of them. I mean, Barkley has his injuries, and, whether he plays is yet to be seen. I believe he will play week 1. But if they're both active, they're both playing in my roster. I don't care how questionable they are. I don't care what that offensive line looks like. I'll worry about later in the season if they really start fading. Then I'll worry about benching them. But yeah, right now I drafted them in the first and second round. They are in my starting lineup.
Alrighty, but besides those guys, you're starting Mike Evans, Chris Godwin if he plays, Cooper Kupp, wrong team, Amari Cooper. The right Cooper is in Dallas, and CeeDee Lamb. Those are all guys you're definitely starting because of their draft capital. That unexciting matchup, but we did talk James Robinson a little bit. Jags, Texans. The biggest question here is which running back in Houston? I know Snyder, I believe, is a huge, I won't say huge, Philip Lindsay fan, but he's a pretty big Philip Lindsay fan. George, even though he doesn't want to admit it, he loves David Johnson. He's not going to admit it on the podcast. And I'm not going to say I'm a Mark Ingram fan, but which guy?
I'll admit, I mean, I was a big David Johnson fan going into last year. He was fairly solid last year, but I have to know when to pull the plug, and he's not even listed as the RB1 anymore. It's Mark Ingram listed as the RB1, but I don't know if I trust him or David Johnson because they're not going to get many carries when the Texans fall behind early in games. So I'm not saying I'm going to start Philip Lindsay this week. That's ridiculous. Don't start Philip Lindsay until you start seeing something from him. But I think he has the best chance of being a guy who could have fantasy value because he's the pass catcher in the backfield, and he's most likely going to get a lot more touches, I should say catches and targets, once the Texans fall down in almost every game.
Honestly, George, let me just fix your statement there a little bit. Don't start Philip Lindsay yet. Don't start a Texan yet. Don't start any Texan in week 1. If you want to start their kicker, okay, fine, start their kicker. But otherwise, even Brandon Cooks is probably their best fantasy asset on that team. But you got Tyrod Taylor throwing the ball, and, we just don't know. He might have a different favorite on that team. It'll probably end up being a receiver we've never heard of. Will break out in week 1. We'll be like, oh, hey. Because every year we look at Brandon Cooks like, oh, man, he's in the right system. He should really perform. And he's just disappointing. So why now when we're looking at him like, he could be good, why are we suddenly thinking he's going to be great? Don't start any Texan. Just let it go for week 1. But as far as that backfield for Houston, you really got to try to break it down. And Mark Ingram is old, but he is slotted right in with the head coach. So he might get some carries there. You got Phillip Lindsay, who every year we don't look at him that highly, and every year he surprises us and performs well. So he could be that guy. David Johnson, he looks like the odd man out, but if you look at training camp, if you look at preseason, and the way that they've been lining everyone up, they're lining David Johnson up as the pass catching back, not Phillip Lindsay. And they're having Phillip Lindsay and Mark Ingram splitting early down work. And David Johnson is your third down back. So with all of that being said, all three of them will be on the field, but none of the three of them should have enough fantasy value to really be relevant. Texans are probably going to fall behind early in a lot of games. So, you got to kind of take some caution with it. But like I said, you don't take any Texans in fantasy, but the real fantasy assets, it's not that unexciting if you look at the Jags, because you got rookie Trevor Lawrence coming out. I'd love to see what he does. Is he going to be a fantasy relevant quarterback? People are taking him at the end of their draft, or even he's still a free agent in a lot of leagues. Could it be Mahomes 2.0, where this surprise quarterback comes at the end of the draft? Every year there's one. It could be him. And then you also got guys like DJ Chark, and you got Marvin Jones, and you got some other interesting pieces. You got James Robinson, who was great last year. Etienne's gone now, so he could be great. I think the Jags have a lot of fantasy assets this year, which is weird for me to say because I still don't view them as that great of a team. But I'm actually kind of excited to see what the Jags do with Lawrence this year.
All right, but so you named a bunch of players. Which one are you starting out of those three receivers? Marvin Jones, DJ Chark, or Laviska Shenault? I know Shenault's getting a lot of hype here, the end of the offseason. Probably the guy I would lean for. Again, hopefully you're at a point where you're not playing any of these guys, but if your team was already ruined with injuries, if you drafted way too early and you're debating these topics, which one of those Jaguars receivers would you start? Or is there any guys you would start over them that might be on the waiver wire?
Yeah, so to answer that question, Laviska Shenault, the reason why he's getting the hype, if anybody's out there like, why is Laviska Shenault? Because Etienne was supposed to be that check down Charlie, short yardage, dump pass kind of person. And with him out, it's not James Robinson taking over those pass catching. He is still going to be the mobile or the rushing running back. The pass catching back is now going to be Laviska Shenault. Chenault's going to get those little dump passes, those little short ones, the screens, the in the trenches kind of work. So Chenault's going to be slotting in as a receiver and kind of like a third down back. So that's why he has some value. But I wouldn't start him yet. Let him get familiar with the system. Let him get some work in. But he is definitely a sleeper. Stash him on your bench if you have the room. Marvin Jones, every year he just comes out and shows that he is fantasy starter, and every year we just underwrite him a little bit. So I think he will be relevant this year. Don't think I'd start him week 1 yet, though. Let him get a rapport with Trevor Lawrence. But the guy you got to start is my boy DJ Chark. I mean, he is just electric. He's a fun receiver to watch. I don't think I would start him as my wide receiver 1, probably not even my wide receiver 2, but he is a more than capable flex option. Slot him in the flex with no problems there. But it also depends on your roster. So guys, if you're out there listening and you have DJ Chark, you don't know if you should play him over a certain guy, reach out to us. One of the three of us is always available, and we will talk to you guys. We will help you set your lineup. Let us know who you are struggling between, and we'll let you know who to start.
I could agree with that. I honestly think as the season goes on, we're going to see more Shenault and Marvin Jones and less DJ Chark, but that's just my bold statement. Chark is still the number 1 in that offense, at least for now. But we'll wait and see what happens there in week 1. Why don't we move on to our next game, which is the Chargers at the Washington football team. The Washington football team is not my favorite team.
Definitely the Chargers are, though.
No, not true.
Okay.
Anyway, I think the biggest thing to look at for this game would be Washington's wide receivers. Cody, do you want to dig into what you heard about Curtis Samuel this week?
Well, in Tuesdays or Wednesday's practice, holidays throw me off here with being off on Monday, so my week is a little bit far behind. But Wednesday's practice, during warmups, actually, Curtis Samuel pulled up, grabbed his hamstring, went off the sideline with the trainers. Haven't heard at the time of recording any full reports, if they have to do any MRIs. Availability for the week is in question. If he's not in question, Terry McLaurin, we're starting him. We draft him round 3. If you're lucky, round 4. You're starting Terry McLaurin. The guy, if Curtis Samuel can't go, I mean, he was pretty much only a flex option, in my opinion anyways. I know you guys, I think, were a little bit higher on him this season than I was. But I think it's a big bump for Logan Thomas if Curtis Samuel can't go, being the number 2 passing option there, unless you want to consider number 3 if you like Antonio Gibson being that big of a passing feature as well. But Curtis Samuel, definitely a name to keep an eye on as the week progresses. You might have to do a hot swap with him come Sunday morning. It could come down to game time. Maybe they'll let us know earlier. But I like the Logan Thomas increase if Curtis Samuel can't play.
I wouldn't say that we were higher on Curtis Samuel because in our league of record, he actually did go undrafted. I did pick him up off free agency, but mainly because it's just, a high percentage owned guy who has some upside that is just sitting there on free agency. I said what the heck and took him as a free agent pickup after the draft, but I'm not super high on him. We are super high on Terry McLaurin. We are Terry McLaurin fans here, and I think he's going to have a huge season. So if you do have him, be excited, guys. It's going to be a good year.
And then for George, I got to ask you, as the resident Chargers fan, we're starting Austin Eckler and we're starting Keenan Allen.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any other guys on the Chargers that you're considering as a flex start? Mike Williams, the rookie Josh Palmer, any other guys are pretty much after those two? What about a guy like Jared Cook if you're streaming tight ends?
If you are weak at tight end, I am a fan of Jared Cook, but I don't know if I'd start in week 1, new system. There's too many question marks there for me. I'd look elsewhere at tight end. I'm interested to see how wide receiver 2 shakes out between Mike Williams, who we always seem to take late round flyers on in drafts, and he's all right some weeks and not other weeks. It's just the nature of how he is. Jalen Guyton, who showed some flashes last year, similar to Mike Williams, and then rookie Josh Palmer. We'll see how that shakes out in targets in week 1, but I would just start Justin Herbert, Austin Eckler, and
pretty much
Keenan Allen.
The guys you're going to start.
Keenan Allen.
I can't believe you forgot your favorite player. Not a fantasy on the Chargers, George. Stop rolling your eyes at me. I know it's a little bit of a delay, but you can stop rolling your eyes. I can still see it. Not a fantasy thing, though. I am really excited to see this offensive line versus that defense front four. Something I might be checking my eye on during Red Zone when they're on this game. But moving on to another one of George's favorite players, Carson Wentz, quarterback of the Colts. He's expected to play week 1. They're hosting the Seattle Seahawks. We've talked all offseason about the Colts wide receivers. We're big Michael Pittman fans here. T.Y. Hilton hit the IR. I know they talked about Nyheim Hines. They wanted him to get a bigger role than last year so he could have potentially stealing even more carries from Jonathan Taylor. Sorry if you drafted Jonathan Taylor above a guy like Ezekiel Elliott. Maybe he might cough up some carries. A lot of interesting pieces on that Colts offense. Is there any guys that stick out to you that you definitely want to get in your lineup, or any guys you think, maybe I should try to tell people to avoid this guy, even though everyone else is on him?
Now, we love Michael Pittman. I want to lead with that, but I don't think you start in week 1. You kind of start the guys you drafted higher in the draft that you think are going to have a chance to be more consistent, and we wait and see on Michael Pittman. But it's worth noting, not only did they lose T.Y. Hilton for the first few weeks as that surgery, I heard something about Paris Campbell, who is their number 2 wide receiver with T.Y. out, is also limited in practice now and may miss week 1. There's not going to be much wide receiver talent in for Indy this week, and Michael Pittman might be the only really guy. You're right. I mean, Michael Pittman probably is the most talked about prospect since T.Y. Hilton, and T.Y. Hilton's been on the down slope for the last few years now. I mean, he had a couple of startable weeks last year. Other than that, he was gone for like 2 years. So we'll see what happens with that. But I think that's going to put a hindrance on Carson Wentz's debut. I mean, I can't even say it's a new system, but new team, new receivers to get in touch with, and a lot of the ones he was working with early in camp are already out.
Yeah, so guys, I actually have a little bit of fear with Jonathan Taylor moving forward, and I was kind of trying to shy away from him in drafts if possible, because, you got to remember that on top of Nyheim Hines being that pass-catching third down back, you got to remember every time they were in the red zone last year, they tried some kind of trickery and get someone else into the end zone other than their backs. A lot of times it was Jacoby Brissett, but they were always trying something different, and that kind of makes me nervous if they're going to shy away from that. Plus, you got to remember, Marlon Mack is back this year. We're all just kind of writing off Marlon Mack like he's a complete non-factor. But even though they drafted Jonathan Taylor, they wanted Marlon Mack to be the number 1 last year, and he was getting the number 1 level carries to start the season before the injury. So you got to remember, Marlon Mack is still going to eat into some of those carries. They're not just going to completely keep him on the bench. They still like this kid with Nyheim Hines there. So I am a little fearful of what Jonathan Taylor is going to be able to do this year. I have a bad feeling that he's going to be on a down slope from what he was last year, but I still think he'll be a good fantasy running back. I would attribute it to like a Josh Jacobs kind of thing, where Jacobs came out and balled out and he was a number one pick the next year and then just kind of didn't bust, but disappointed a little bit the next year and everyone kind of wrote him off. I think it's going to be somewhat similar to that situation. Maybe I'm wrong, but I'm the hot takes guy. So that's how I'm looking at it right now.
I hope you're wrong. On the Seahawks standpoint, though, we're starting the big three. Russ, DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, Chris Carson. You're starting those guys. You drafted them to start them. Not much else to say. The defense might be a little good about the Colts, so it might not be as a big week as you're hoping for since you spent high capital on all those guys. But that's should be a fun one. Jets, Panthers, also known as the Sam Darnold revenge game. You want me to add this is George's third favorite team? If you're going to shake your head,
No.
You're getting a little annoyed at me for some reason, George. I thought we were friends.
I was only laughing because I was trying to think of who I would start in this game.
Robbie Anderson
and CMC. Is that it?
Braxton Berrios.
Yeah,
no.
Not seriously. Anybody listening, don't actually start Braxton Berrios.
and depending on how my roster went, fortunately, I didn't have J.K. Dobbins in any league that I drafted this year. So like, I'm not with you or Travis Etienne. So I'm not with this whole. I lost a guy drafted in the top 6 rounds, and I'm trying to find a replacement for him. So like, if I had a running back in my flex, and now I have to put him in my starting lineup, I'm trying to find a new flex option. Corey Davis might slip in there. We talked about him a lot as a potential the number one guy. He had a connection with Zach Wilson. Outside of that, not really. The running back room is be interesting to see who actually gets the bulk of the carries. A lot of reports are it's going to be Tevin Coleman, and he's on a lot of waiver wires right now. So maybe that's a guy you go out and grab before week 1, just hold him on your roster, and then, heck, if he doesn't get any action after week 1, cut him for someone else to pick up for the Sunday night game or something like that. But yeah, Robbie Anderson, CMC, I'm starting. Sam Darnold in a super flex league, I'd start Sam Darnold. But outside of that, there's not much exciting about this game. I mean, I like Sam Darnold over season outlook as potentially breaking out, but not in week 1.
So you guys wouldn't be starting DJ Moore?
I mean, he said Robbie Anderson. I think Robbie Anderson and DJ Moore are right there for me. They might both be flexes. Maybe. The Jets are an unproven defense. That wouldn't be a bad play this week. You're right.
I totally forgot about DJ Moore because I always put Robbie Anderson above him, even though they are really close. And DJ Moore, I think, is actually listed as the number 1. So yeah, DJ Moore definitely would be a flex option. Wide receiver 2, if you drafted 3 running backs, it's the Jets. I know they got Robert Saleh. We still don't expect much out of the Jets this year. They're still a few pieces away. So good call on Snyder by reminding us of DJ Moore. That was a great ad because he should most likely be playing in your lineups.
Moving on then to Vikings at Bengals. We got the return of Joe Burrow. We got the crowded Bengals wide receiver room. All these guys were taken almost the exact same spot in drafts, and they were all taken like pretty much as bench guys. Are there any Bengals wide receivers you're thinking about starting this week, or are you waiting and seeing?
I feel like we're going to have this conversation all season long on which Bengals receiver do you start this week. It kind of reminds me of the Seahawks last year, even though that was only 2 receivers. It was like, is it a Lockett week or is it a Metcalf week? You don't know. Only one of them's going to break out. It's never both, but you got to pick right or, you could be losing your matchup. And I feel like we're going to have this conversation all year long. Hopefully Joe Burrow picks a favorite and we can really start moving forward knowing at least one guy is definitely going to get those targets. But as far as would you start any of them this week, I think if I had to start one of them, I'd actually go with Tyler Boyd. I think that's the guy that I'm leaning towards the most out of the 3. I'm the hot takes guy. Look at me all you want.
Dude, that's my guy. That's what I was going to say. I'm kind of irritated that you said it. Tyler Boyd is the best wide receiver for fantasy on that team this year.
I agree. Jamar Chase is a rookie. He's still not fully slotted into that offense yet. You have T. Higgins. I just don't feel like T. Higgins has the same rapport as Tyler Boyd does. I don't feel like he is quite where he is. I think T. Higgins could be great in the future, but he's not there yet. He didn't get to play with Joe Burrow too much last year because Burrow did go down relatively early in the season. So I feel like it's going to have to be Tyler Boyd. He's the most veteran of the three on that team, on that wide receiver core. So that's the guy I'd move with.
Yeah, out of those three, I'd go Tyler Boyd, then T. Higgins, then Jamar Chase, especially for week one. But that's how I see it going for most of the season. I'm not putting too much into the drop issues that Jamar Chase had, like long-term value. If you got him in Dynasty, like don't sweat it. He's just a rookie behind three guys, similar to Chase Claypool last year. He'll have a big game here and there, but he was behind two other guys. And I look at Juju Smith-Schuster, similar to T. Higgins, and I look at Tyler Boyd as Deontay Johnson. He's going to get the receptions. He's going to get the targets. So I like Tyler Boyd, and you got him a lot later than you were drafting Deontay Johnson, who I like a lot as well.
And then looking at the Vikings side, I don't think there's any surprises really. We're probably sitting on Chris Herndon this week. We're not going to start him, but we might add him to our rosters because we want that speculative ad. You're starting Justin Jefferson, you're starting Adam Thielen, and you're starting Dalvin Cook. Like, that's pretty much it, I think.
Yeah, let's move on.
Yep, okay. That's it.
Moving on to Cardinals at Titans. Tyler, any Titans we should be looking at this week?
Yeah, everyone on the roster. Everyone on the roster, pretty much. You could even start the kicker, Sam Kickin' Fickin. You can start any one of them. No, honestly, before we get too deep, there is a report that A.J. Brown did not practice because of a knee injury, and it's worth monitoring. However, if you drafted A.J. Brown and you're worried about him, just know he did not practice on a Wednesday all of last season. Not one time. So this is completely normal for him. You can't just not practice with no injury. I mean, you can't put non-injury related, but he had the knee issues last year. It's easy to just list it as a knee injury. And if you're wondering if he is definitely going to play and you want a little bit of a sign, it was reported that A.J. Brown did trade for himself in fantasy and said it's because he expects to ball out week one and wants to win himself his own matchup. That's just a report. Could it be wrong? Possibly, but it was from a good source, so something to look into. But yeah, A.J. Brown, Julio Jones, Derrick Henry, all three of them are startable. And I think if you didn't draft a quarterback early, like a Mahomes or Russell Wilson, Aaron Rodgers, one of those guys, Ryan Tannehill should be totally fine as your quarterback for this week as well, because you got to remember the Cardinals did just lose Malcolm Butler, so their corners are weaker now. The receivers should have a bit more to go on. So I think, our big three plus Tannehill should all be good to go for this week in fantasy.
I look at it like this. Like, A.J. Brown never practices on a Wednesday. Julio Jones never practices on a Wednesday either. The Titans scout team wide receivers are going to get a lot of work midweek in that practice.
Yeah.
Hey, they need it because after those two, there's not much there.
Josh Reynolds?
Josh Reynolds is the only other name that I think anyone would know.
Okay, I said there's not much. I didn't say there's nobody. There's not much. And I think my statement still is true.
Cam Batson, who was a number 3 receiver for the Titans last year and did great. Let's look at him too. You trying to fight me, Cody?
No, my point was just made by the name you just uttered. But the Cardinals, let's talk about the Cardinals. Hopkins, we're starting. Kyler Murray, we're starting. What about the running backs? Chase Edmonds, James Conner. Are you trying to keep them out of your rosters at all costs? Is there anyone you're comfortable starting? For me, I'm like, please don't make me play any of these guys.
That's exactly how I am. I'd go Chase Edmonds out of the two running backs, personally.
I think I agree with you, and I think it's because the big play potential, like he had a couple of games last year where he went off, even though he only got, say, 8 to 10 carries, and it's just because he's that explosive dude. So you're right. I think because of the big plays, it's Chase Edmonds.
I also believe that, the Titans do have a good offense this year. They have the pieces, but even though they added some defensive pieces, their defense is still up in the air. We don't know where it's going to be. So I think, like a lot of Titans games might be this year, there could be a lot of shootouts. And when you get into a shootout, you're going to want your big play running back or your pass catching running back that can break it loose. And that's going to be Chase Edmonds. So there's a chance that, Chase Edmonds actually factors more into this game because of the weaker Titans defense than most normal games. So if you have to start someone in your flex this week, I would go Chase Edmonds. But like Cody said, if you have a choice, bench them both.
Just like if you have a choice to start any Lions other than TJ Hockenson, don't do it. And that's our next matchup. The 49ers are at the Lions. TJ Hockenson, sure, start him. You drafted him to start him. Outside of that, You're not starting Tyrell Williams. You're not starting Amon-Ra St. Brown. You're not starting DeAndre Swift, even though he's supposed to play. I'm not starting him. You drafted him in the running back dead zone. You might not have a choice because of where you drafted him. If you went tight end early, you might have to start DeAndre Swift. But with him being injured for so long with his groin injury, I'm finding different options to play than DeAndre Swift. That's my opinion. George went, So I feel like George is okay playing DeAndre Swift. George, why don't you tell me about that?
I'm okay playing DeAndre Swift, but like you said, if you have other options, definitely take the other options. This week's going to be very important to see what happens with Jamal Williams. There's a lot of people that say he's going to get a lot of carries. There's a lot of people that say, oh, it doesn't matter. Now's when we finally find out. So keep a close eye on that backfield. Also, Tyler's probably starting Jared Goff because he likes him better than Matt Stafford, but that's fine.
I mean, I like Jared Goff more. I think, okay, you're taking my words out of context here. All I said was I don't believe that Matt Stafford is that much better than Jared Goff. That's all I said. But no, I'm still not starting Jared Goff this week. I mean, I have him in a dynasty league on a team where my number one quarterback was Ben Roethlisberger, and I still cut Jared Goff and found other options. Yes, that dynasty team's quarterbacks are struggling, but we won't get into that. Yeah, I'm not starting Jared Goff. DeAndre Swift, though, Cody, I got to take a look at your team here in our league of record. You went wide receiver heavy to start that league. You went Devontae Adams. You went Tyreek Hill. You went Mike Evans. So DeAndre Swift was your number one running back, and you said you're not starting him. So are you willing to play a Darrell Henderson? That's pretty much it. Darrell Henderson over DeAndre Swift this week?
Sure, I would. That 49ers front is legit. I don't trust the Lions offense. I said it during the draft. The Swift pick was one of my least favorite picks on him. I would move him in a heartbeat if somebody wanted to make an offer for him, but I'm not getting offers for DeAndre Swift. Again, it's the groin injury. I think he's a very talented running back. He's going up against a really good defense coming off a groin injury where he barely practiced or played this whole preseason. Until yesterday, they weren't even sure if he was going to play, and all of a sudden he's ready to go. I look for Jamal, to see even more carries than the typical normal. So again, in my case, you're right. Maybe I will have to start him if Henderson's out. But I drafted Myles Gaskin later than him, and I would 100% start Myles Gaskin over DeAndre Swift.
49ers side, it's important to note that Trey Lance missed about a week with a bone chip in his finger. Jimmy Garoppolo, Jimmy G, is most definitely the week one starter. It sounds more and more like it, even though Shanahan will not clearly say it. He's pretty much inferring it. And you're probably starting Brandon Ayuk because you drafted him as a flex. Deebo Samuel went later. Lions defense, not great. Would you guys start Deebo Samuel this week?
I need to not answer this question because I'm a Deebo Samuel fanboy, so I'm too biased when it comes to him. So that's all Snyder.
I mean, this is the typical cop-out answer that I use for everything, but it depends who you have. Honestly, with the draft capital you spent on Deebo Samuel as a end-of-your-draft pick or late-round flyer, probably not. You probably have somebody above him that you are able to start, but at the same time, it is early in the season. There are guys that took a DeAndre Swift. There are people that took a J.K. Dobbins, or, if you drafted early, a Cam Akers. There's definitely people that you might be missing. You might have to start somebody else. And if you do, I think you can start Deebo Samuel and feel all right with it.
Yeah, I would say you could start him as a flex option and feel fine. Maybe not as fine if you're starting George Kittle, because George Kittle is probably going to be tight end one after week one based on the matchup. And hopefully you drafted their defense because they'll probably be defensive one after their matchup. I have no faith in the Lions this year. So they're going to be the Jets for me in this year until they prove me wrong. But a game I am excited for, guys, and I'm sure George is too, because it's his fourth favorite team. That is the Buffalo Bills, as they're hosting the Pittsburgh Steelers. I feel like we're starting everyone that you drafted from these teams are willing to start, whether that's Chase Claypool, Deontay Johnson, Juju Smith-Schuster. If you drafted one of them, you have faith that they can at least be a flex option. You're starting Stephon Diggs because you drafted him early enough. You drafted Josh Allen, you're starting him. You spent a high draft pick on them. I guess for me, is there any guys on the edges, the Devin Singletary versus Zach Moss? If you, again, were hammered by these running back injuries, any of them going to sneak in? For me, the answer is no. Maybe a tight end like Tyler Dawson Knox, not Tyler Kroft. He plays for the Jets. Dawson Knox for the Gabriel Davis, a sleeper that Snyder was on. Any of those guys, or is it just pretty much this game is chalk? You're starting the guys you expect to start, and there's no one else.
Look, I love Gabriel Davis, and I'm a huge Gabriel Davis truther, but you still got to remember Cole Beasley was the number 2 last year, not Gabriel Davis, and he's still on that team, so you still got to wait and see what he does and which one of them emerges as the true number 2 this year. I feel like it will be Gabriel Davis by the end of the season because I think he has the more upside, the more talent, the more speed, but Cole Beasley has proven time and time again that he is a reliable number 2 option, and Josh Allen already knows him and trusts him. So Beasley could be that guy, but we don't know for sure, which is why you have to shy away from him and Gabriel Davis for week 1. Stick with, Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs. It's crazy because, I look at their team like an offensive, not a powerhouse, but they're a strong offensive team. They put up big points every week, but outside of Stephon Diggs and Josh Allen, there's really not a lot on that team that you feel comfortable slotting in every week. So, yeah, Cody, I got to agree with you. I'm going to shy away with all of them. I know that George is a bigger Zach Moss fan than I am. His girlfriend is definitely a bigger Zach Moss fan than I am. And I'm just not thrilled with him. I thought he was going to be good last year, but he ended up just disappointing. And neither him or Devin Singletary emerged as a true number 1 running back. They were both just meh. They were both just there. I don't like either one of them this year.
I think the reason that I took Zach Moss in a lot of leagues, I would not start in week 1. No, you have to see how that backfield shakes out. But when you're stabbing for late round running backs, you're trying to find someone who could be a starter, which is why you're taking people like Michael Carter, who has high upside, even though he's not a starter on the depth chart right now. Zach Moss, I think, is more talent, a better chance to be a solid number 1 than Devin Singletary, which is why I lean that direction. But you don't really know where the backfield's going to go yet. That's the one of the things I'm definitely watching in week 1. If you're forced to start one of the Bills' number 2 or 3 receivers, I think it has to be Cole Beasley because you've seen more out of him. But I'm with Tyler. I think as the season goes on, you're going to see more Gabriel Davis.
Yeah, I can definitely see that as well. Hitting the Steelers real quick, is there any of the big 3 wide receivers that you like more if for some reason you drafted 2 of them, or if you're debating starting one or the other? Is there a guy that you wouldn't start at all? Like, for me personally, like Juju Smith-Schuster, he's probably ranked 3, and he's a guy I would try to keep on my bench. The other 2, I'd feel very good with Deontay Johnson. I'm still not 100% sure on Chase Claypool, but I wouldn't mind him in the flex. Juju, for me, is the guy that I'm like, if I can avoid not playing him, that's where I'm leaning.
I'm 100% with you, Cody. I feel like he brings the least to the table when it comes to being a big play threat. Tyler, do you differ?
Yeah, always. But I've always been the odd man out here, but I hate Deontay Johnson. I don't like him at all. I didn't take him in a single league. I never even looked at him in the draft. I just completely avoided him. I don't like him. He drops passes so much. And yes, he's still got a lot of volume, but if he brings back those drops issues, they have Claypool, they have Juju Smith-Schuster. You have other guys who are capable of catching the ball. They still have Eric Ebron. They still have Pat Freiermuth. That's another guy. So you have other guys that are options. If you start having those drops issues like you did last year, you will get shied away from. I like Claypool number 1, in my opinion. I like Juju number 2. I thought Juju sucked the last couple of years, and I think a big part of it was because he was the number 1 receiver. But I think with Claypool there now, he's not the number 1 receiver anymore. And look what Juju did back when Antonio Brown was there as the number 1. He was phenomenal. It's the same thing that I always said about Corey Davis. When he was the number 1, trash. When he was the number 2, great. So I think as a number 2, Juju can really shine this year. I like Juju a lot.
All righty. George, we can talk about your favorite team now.
Oh, you're actually at least going to call them my favorite team?
Sure. I mean, you do have a banner of them behind you, but the Eagles are at the Falcons. This matchup is... I remember back when this matchup used to be like the prime time. Like, there was almost a little rivalry because of the playoff battles and then the last-minute games down in Atlanta. And now it's like, oh, this game's on? No offense, George.
No, it's true.
I'm assuming if you drafted Jalen Hurts, you probably took him as your late round flyer because you bailed on a quarterback. So you're probably going to start him. You're definitely starting Calvin Ridley. Mike Davis. I know probably starting Mike Davis. But is that it? I mean, I'm not starting any Eagles wide receiver, and I don't love starting Dallas Goedert, even though you probably drafted him to start him.
No, this is a wait and see kind of game. You're probably starting Mike Davis where you drafted him, but you're watching out to see what Wayne Gallman gets. I'll tell you, I punted on kicker. I mean, punted on quarterback in our league of record, and I have Jalen Hurts and Joe Burrow. I'm starting Jalen Hurts because I think it's a good matchup, but there are probably going to be some weeks where you don't want to start him. And I'm waiting on Devontae Smith and the other Eagles wide receivers definitely because you just don't know how that's going to shake out or how any of them are going to play. Even a lot of unproven talents, really. Yeah, you pretty much hit the nail on the head.
I mean, I'm starting Kyle Pitts. I'm just saying.
Yeah,
I love Kyle Pitts. I love what he can bring to the table. I understand there is the whole he's a rookie tight end. He's gonna, but what rookie tight end has ever been drafted in the top 5 in the NFL ever? None. Cool. Good talk. So you can't just link him in with all other tight ends. He's just a gifted freak. The Eagles defense, I don't know why they're talked about highly. They're trash. They can't stop anything. So I think Calvin Ridley's not going to be the only guy catching passes. Yes, Russell Gage is there. He doesn't throw me as much either. So I think Kyle Pitts is going to be the number 2 receiving option there. I'm starting Kyle Pitts in fantasy.
We just beg to differ. Kyle Pitts, I've said multiple times why I don't think you should spend the draft capital to get him where he was going. I feel like he'll be a guy that disappoints a lot of people in fantasy. But maybe I'll be wrong. And the matchup is positive, so I'll give you that. Browns, Chiefs, possibly a potential AFC Championship preview. But again, there's not a lot here to add. You know, you're starting Nick Chubb. You're probably comfortable flexing Kareem Hunt. Chiefs side, you're starting Hill, Kelsey, Mahomes. I guess the biggest question for me, and I know who I'm talking to, so I probably know the answer, but what about OBJ? I know there's some hype there. I know he's coming off another injury. He went pretty late in drafts. He's a huge name, though. So is there any chance you'd consider him as a flex option? Again, Snyder's going to say, well, it depends who you have. But if you had him on a team, what would you feel about him, about OBJ?
I'm starting him. I'm starting him in my flex. I like OBJ this week. I really do. I think the Chiefs, I mean, they're an offensive powerhouse. Now, this is a team you can say powerhouse for. They are going to put up points. They're going to put up points big. And I think, I mean, call me crazy, hot takes guy, but I think teams are going to start looking at the Browns receivers with Jarvis Landry more as the number 1 instead of OBJ. I think that Landry's going to start getting more of the number 1 corners because of what he has shown the last few years. So I think OBJ is going to get a little bit more room. And I think with that, OBJ is really going to step up. And like I said, Chiefs are going to be putting up points. They're going to put up points big, even with a good Browns defense. With that, it's shootout. You got to air the ball out a little bit more. Baker Mayfield is not afraid to sling it deep. And we know what OBJ can do when he gets rolling. So yeah, I like OBJ in the flex this week. I'm not afraid taking him in leagues.
Yeah, I would probably shy away from OBJ at least this week. But I think that's also the person to me who's seen Baker Mayfield play worse with OBJ than without him. So we'll see if that changes. I might change my mind a few weeks down the road if I see a little bit of success, but as of now, I'm pumping the brakes.
Yeah, I would lean play OBJ for me. That's just, I guess, me and Tyler, because we agreed. Again, this is not turning into a good show. We're agreeing way too much. I don't like it. How about the next matchup that you guys will probably say you don't like, but I am the most excited for? That's the Packers at the Saints, but in Jacksonville because of, again, thoughts, condolences, prayers all out to people affected by Hurricane Ida. This game has been moved to Jacksonville. Saints are playing Kamara. I'll let you all debate which wide receiver you're playing from the Saints. Are you playing any of them?
Yeah, I'd probably lean Callaway too, but there's got to be better options out there than Marquez Callaway for your flex option. So I'm not playing any of them. I'm going to wait and see on it. I do think that Troutman's going to be good this year. I mean, obviously, he's probably not playing in week 1. We don't know yet, but I do think that Troutman's going to be good this year. So maybe later we can look at him. But for right now, just avoid all Saints other than Kamara. Even Jameis Winston. I mean, I like Winston. I was a truther over him last year, but I do think he is, a little on the iffier side. He can throw plenty of picks, and the Packers do have good secondary. By the way, breaking news, Austin Eckler did not practice today due to a hamstring injury, so that's something to monitor. We will post about it before game time if there is any update on that. But back to the game. Yeah, I think if you're going to start people, you're starting people from the Packers. You're starting Aaron Jones. You're starting Aaron Rodgers. You're starting Devante Adams. But Cody, I mean, after Devante Adams, what receiver should people be looking at from the Packers? Is it the rookie or is it somebody else?
It's Marquez Valdez-Scantling. That should be the number 2 guy. I think he's gonna have a big breakout season, a little bit more than he did last year. Probably similar numbers, just a little bit more consistent. So we'll give him a couple upticks from last year. He'll be the number 2 guy. You can't rule out Randall Cobb being a Rodgers favorite, but I think I'll see him more as like the guy on third down. That, okay, we need 6 yards. Until they stop it, we're going to Randall Cobb. But I think Marquez Valdez-Scantling, he's going to be involved a lot. He's the guy I would encourage, if you have the draft space or the roster space, to go out and grab and keep on your. I'm not starting him week 1 because he's a free agent in like 97% of leagues, I feel like. I don't have the exact number in front of me, but that seems pretty accurate. But I'd go out and grab him. He could be a hot waiver target after this first week. So that's the guy. A.J. Dillon is another. I'm just going to keep talking about A.J. Dillon. If you're comfortable starting both Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt, after this week, you'll be comfortable starting both A.J. Dillon and Aaron Jones. That's just how I feel. Wow. George is already shaking his head. I think A.J. Dillon is going to be heavily utilized in ways that they're going to be a true tandem, both on the field in some sets. I think Jones will be used in the passing game more, so Dillon would get more running carries. Again, it sounds bold. Typically, we leave the whole bold hot takes to Tyler. But yeah, I like, not this week, but moving forward, I definitely like A.J. Dillon. And last thing, back to the Saints, Adam Troutman was not on the injury report, so he is looking for, likely he's going to play. Because there's no other receivers,
Good.
If you're desperate at tight end, like myself, who drafted Irv Smith and then he got hurt, and I also grabbed Troutman at the very end, he's a guy I might play just because they're going to have to throw it to somebody, and I do expect this to be a high-scoring game between both teams.
Now I have a good question for you then before we move on to the next game. I like Robert Tonyan this week. Would you play Tonyan or Troutman?
Well, if I had Tonyan, I'd play him, but Tonyan got drafted.
Hypothetical.
Well, I'd still play Tonyan.
Okay.
Mr. Funyuns himself.
All right, so why don't we move on then to Broncos at Giants.
Snooze fest.
My biggest question here has to be the Broncos backfield. Are you comfortable with whoever the starter's going to be? Are you flexing them this week?
Oh, no. I'd flex Melvin Gordon for sure.
Okay.
I mean, he won't be the start. He'll have the job for the first half of the season before Devante fully takes it over. But Melvin Gordon will be the number 1 guy for the first 4 weeks of the season at least. So for now, I'm definitely comfortable starting Melvin Gordon.
The only guy on the Broncos that I'm comfortable starting in week 1, only 2, would be Fant and Sutton. And that's not even real comfortable. That's just like if you have to start a Bronco, it'd be Fant and Sutton.
Not even Judy.
I was going to say, like, actually, there's a lot of people who are saying Judy's becoming the number 1 on the depth chart now.
I think Judy is the number 1 on the depth chart, and I do think he'll be good. I just don't think he's going to be good week 1. I think that it's going to take him some time to really get rapport with Teddy Two Gloves and become something better. So I'm not sure on starting Judy in week 1. I like Sutton a little bit more for week 1, but honestly, I don't really want to start any of them. I don't like any Bronco in week 1, even against the Giants team that I'm not thrilled with.
Yeah, and then the Giants are the same boat. Like outside of Barkley, like I know Galladay was drafted kind of high, so he might be in your flex considerations. I'm moving off him if I can. You know, I talked early in the offseason. I look for Daniel Jones to take a big step, but they can't stay healthy at all at any of their positions right now. They're getting hit by the injury bug. Nothing serious, a lot of just tweaks and minor injuries, so it could be a few weeks before they start to bounce back. So, and if Barkley's not a full go, definitely don't like the Giants this week.
Definitely agree with that. So not much to say. Yeah, let's move on to Dolphins at Patriots. So we're probably not looking at any Patriots wide receivers, even with Mac Jones in there. But are you starting Damian Harris? He's been a guy who's screaming up draft boards here right before the season starts. Do you like him enough to even flex him now?
I'd start him over DeAndre Swift.
Whew.
In week 1, I'm a little concerned, though, because the Dolphins' defense was legit last year. The Dolphins' defense was the reason that they started winning games when Tua started. Not because of Tua, but because the Dolphins' defense just started shutting teams out left and right. So I'm a little worried about what Damian Harris is going to be able to do. I also still don't trust the Patriots that much. I feel like they could fall behind in this game a little bit. So I feel like they're going to have to shy away from the run game. My favorite people in this matchup would have to be Myles Gaskin, who I think is going to end up being one of the
Myles Gaskin.
He's going to be one of the biggest sleepers of this season. I mean, you heard it here. He's had
if you make a bold take about Myles Gaskin, I'm going to get up and leave, because if we were doing bold predictions, I would have said he's a number 1 running back this year, top 12.
You already made him one of your my guys, bro.
I know. I love Myles Gaskin.
Look, Myles Gaskin last year had some of the best average yards per carry, average fantasy points per game as some of the other top running backs in the league. He just missed some time with COVID, missed some time with injury, so he looks worse because he was lower on the draft boards. He actually got the same amount of red zone touches last year. You can look this up. Same amount of red zone touches last year as Nick Chubb. So he is a red zone guy on top of it. A lot of people look at him as a between the 20s kind of running back, when in reality, he really was a red zone guy too. I think that he is a huge sleeper. And I don't think Tua's all there yet. I don't think he's the guy that you can just leave the team on. So you have to rely somewhere else. And we've seen it with the Titans doing it with Derrick Henry. You just kind of lean on that running back and let him carry the load, and then let the rest of the team fall into place. So I love Myles Gaskin this year. I agree with Cody. I think he could be a top 10 running back this year. So if you drafted him late in your drafts, great pick. The other guy I like is, and it might just be because I've liked this guy for years, but Devante Parker. I'm a big Devante Parker fan. Do I start him this week? Probably not. Probably leaving him on the bench, but I think that he could really surprise and come out and get some points. I don't think Jalen Waddle is the guy yet, so I would avoid him, leave him on the bench. But Devante Parker, guys, I'm a big fan of his. I'm hoping he has a good year because he's one of my favorite players in the league.
Yeah, he's fun. He's like Albert Wilson for me. He's a guy that I like. I just like watching him play. I'm not starting him. He's not owned. Like, he's probably like 0.2% owned. Again, no numbers in front of me, just guessing. That sounds about right. But another guy, he before being injured, he was a quality guy in fantasy football, and he runs short little crossing routes. Would be great for Tua. So just a guy put in the back of your head that, if he can stay healthy, might be a fun name. Patriots wise, what about the tight ends? Hunter Henry's supposed to play. Jonnu Smith, tight ends, a young quarterback's best friend.
Just a little note here: Devante Parker is 30% owned.
If I had to start one of them, probably Jonnu Smith. I don't know. That'd be my stab in the dark first week, and we'll see how the targets shake out. It's so hard to tell so far.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Pretty much no Patriots I want to own. One of them will look really good. Everyone will pick him up, and then he won't do anything for the rest of the season, because that's how the Bill Belichick Patriots work. 2 more games left in our preview here. The Chicago Bears at the LA Rams, Sunday Night Football. Cooper Kupp, Robert Woods, they're being started. Allen Robinson, you're starting him. David Montgomery, you're starting him. Darrell Henderson, you hope to start him, but again, we're not sure on his injury, and he's the Sunday night game, so you might have to make the decision early. And if you have 3 running backs, make sure he's in the flex, so if you have to swap out a wide receiver, you can.
But let me just stop you there. If he doesn't play, do you trust that Sony Michel has had enough time in that system to be effective in week 1?
Sure. It's Sean McVay.
Okay.
They run the ball.
So Sony Michel becomes that dark horse fill if you have an injury late in the week and Darrell Henderson's out.
Yeah, I mean, if it comes down to the Sunday Night Football, then yeah.
Yeah, if it's a game time decision and you got Sony Michel sitting there, I'd feel a lot better about rolling the dice with Darrell Henderson. I mean, I'm not like rushing to jump Sony Michel into any of my starting lineups, because I'm still hopeful that Darrell Henderson plays. But
But if you have to start Henderson, it might not be a bad idea to add him to your bench and have him there as a security policy.
George, you want to drop him?
Nope, I'm good. I'll hold on to him.
Trade him for DeAndre Swift.
Okay, hey, there you go. Deals on the table.
I don't like DeAndre Swift, but it's not that dumb. I like him a lot more than that. All right, but that, like we said,
well, you tried, Tyler. I appreciate it.
Maybe you'll probably send me a request after we've done recording. I can already see it now. But our last game, Ravens, Raiders. The Ravens, we talked about at the beginning. You're starting Gus Edwards. You're starting Lamar Jackson. You're starting Mark Andrews. The Raiders are starting Darren Waller. Is there any Ravens receiver or Raiders receiver that you're getting in your flex area? George is already shaking his head. He's like, let's wrap this up because there's none of these guys I want to talk about.
Well, it's week 1. So Sammy Watkins likes being really good in week 1.
Maybe in your DFU leagues or, get Sammy
DFS
Watkins
leagues,
really.
You mean
DFS.
Yeah.
Sorry. DFU is your other dynasty league that you asked me questions about. So
yes, it is.
So see, listeners, they ask me for questions. Just saying. I mean, I also ask them for questions because that's what we do. We ask each other for questions.
I was gonna say, don't make it sound like you're the resident here. Everyone goes through and just the all-knowing.
In all seriousness, though, just don't start Sammy Watkins, please.
Yeah, I wouldn't either. Only thing I want to say is keep an eye, again, a name for next week's waivers show, Bryan Edwards. I think he was a rookie last year. People were high on. I think he could take another step forward and become a hot waiver pickup. So, maybe if a guy gets injured that's on your bench or a guy that you have on your bench, your last draft pick, some leagues don't allow it. Some leagues do. You can drop players even though if they played, if they're on your bench. So since this is the Monday night game, you've already seen the guys on Sunday, maybe drop them before pick up Bryan Edwards, take a chance on him to see how it is. Again, those are some ways
Edwards
you can
over
always...
Ruggs.
Yeah. For consistency. I think Ruggs will still have his big games where he has, 3 catches, 115 yards and a touchdown. But I like the consistency of Bryan Edwards. Again, I mean, 95% of the targets are going to Darren Waller on this team, but again, that's a little facetious too. That's probably too high, but you get the point. For a consistency standpoint, I do like Bryan Edwards over Henry Ruggs. Long term. Guy I'm sneaking onto my roster at the end of the week type move. But guys, that's everyone. Week 1. So there's only one left to do. We gotta stick a stake in the ground and claim our Super Bowl champions. George, tell me why it's going to be the Chargers.
It is not going to be the Chargers.
Were they in consideration?
It's going to be as a dark horse. And I thought about going with a dark horse because I did last year and it made me look good, but I'm going to stick with that same dark horse as last year. And I'm going to say it's going to be the Buffalo Bills versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers because it always has to be Tom Brady and it's going to be him again. But I'm going to go out on a limb and say the Bills are going to beat the Buccaneers.
Well, as long as Tom Brady loses, I'm okay with it.
Oh, mister, I'm a Tom Brady fan now.
Tom Brady, the person, not the football player, was definitely said.
All right. I'll move on to my pick. And look, it's so easy to pick the Chiefs. And it's so easy to pick the Bucs. It's a cop-out. Totally just throwing shade at my other two guys here. But I'm going to try to avoid them because I just don't want to see them in the Super Bowl again. I'm ready for something different. So I'm going to try to will this into existence. And I'm going with the Tennessee Titans making the Super Bowl. Look, the only thing holding them back last year was defense, and they added a lot of defensive pieces. I'm hoping that's what they need to get on to the next step.
As he said, their defense was very weak in their Week 1 preview.
I said they are a question mark, and we don't know what they are yet if you go back and listen. But then the other team, I'm going to go with a dart throw here. I'm going to go with a team that I think it's going to be shades of the past, and I'm going with the 49ers. If we look at the 49ers in the Colin Kaepernick era, they were good, not great with Alex Smith. Smith went down, Kaepernick stepped in, and they became great and they went on all the way to the Super Bowl. And I think we're going to have shades of that this year. I think Trey Lance is going to step in mid-season and take that team from good to great. And I think this team has a lot of depth, a lot of receivers, a lot of running backs, all of them that could be starters on other teams, but there are 3 or 4 on this team because they're so good. And they still have a good defense. They have all the pieces they need. They got the head coach. So I think the 49ers, if they can stay healthier than last year, versus the Tennessee Titans, and I mean, come on, guys, you know me. I'm going with the Titans to win it.
Yeah, I can't even call you a homer because I'm about to make a homer pick as well. I'm going with the Green Bay Packers, and we all know, we've seen the post. It's being written as the last dance. Now, granted, we haven't won 5 previous championships. We've been to 5 previous NFC championships, but we haven't won 5 previous Super Bowls. But the Packers, in the Super Bowl, they beat the LA Rams, and I'm going to have the Chiefs beating the Ravens. I think the Ravens have a real shot at the Super Bowl this year, but can't go too bold because that's Tyler's job. Going to pick the Chiefs. And the same results as Super Bowl 1. The Packers beat the Chiefs. Aaron Rodgers goes out with the Packers with the Super Bowl championship. And you all thought last offseason was wild. Wait till the Packers trade the Super Bowl winning MVP quarterback for a boatload of draft picks. But that's what they're going to do. So Packers win it all. George is laughing at me. Again, I don't understand why. I think it's a good pick.
Would that be unprecedented to have a Super Bowl MVP traded the next season? I mean, the Eagles traded Nick Foles 2 seasons later, but the next season?
Also, let's not compare Aaron Rodgers to Nick Foles.
I'm just trying to think of scenarios where a Super Bowl MVP was traded the next season. And that was the only thing I can think of that came close. It's not even in the same realm, but close.
Yeah, but it's a good thing that the offseason for next year is a long time away. We got, 21 straight weeks of football on Sundays? So let's just enjoy the ride while we're on it. Crown the Packers champions at the end of it. But this is the end of this show. So thank you guys for listening to another episode of the Couch GMs. It's a fun one, and football is back.
And guys, listen, I know that you love our podcast. I know that we are your favorite podcast. You don't have to tell us. We already know that. But we need you to spread the word a little bit. And the best way to get our podcast out there is by leaving a review. Give us a 5-star review so that when people search fantasy podcasts, our name comes up. Help spread the word. Give us a review. Give us a shout out. Tell your friends. And even better yet, get involved. You can reach out to us at any time asking us fantasy questions. Who should you draft? Who should you start in your lineup? It's that time. If you don't know who to turn to us. It's more fun for us and more fun for you when you get involved.
And thank you all one more time for listening into the Couch GMs podcast. For Tyler Snyder and Cody Roadcap, I'm George Kerth. Enjoy week 1, and we'll see you all next week.